The phone call came at 10:30. Beatriz Zimmermann was sitting in a police station in Santa Cruz, the capital of Tenerife, having just reported her daughters missing. 6-year-old Olivia and 1-year-old Anna had spent that April afternoon with their father, as they did every Tuesday. They were supposed to be home by dinner. When she answered, she heard his voice, calm and cold, calling from somewhere out on the water. What he said made her blood run cold. "You will never see your daughters again." Tenerife, part of Spain's Canary Islands off the coast of Africa, is a place of volcanic peaks and busy seaside towns. It's a popular holiday destination, the kind of place where families vacation in the year-round warmth. Beatriz Zimmermann, originally from the neighboring island of La Palma, had made Tenerife her home. In 2011, she married a local man, Tomás Antonio Jimeno Casañas, and together they had 2 daughters, Olivia, born in 2015, and little Anna, born in 2020. Photographs show Olivia as a smiling 6-year-old with dark hair, and baby Anna with bright, curious eyes. The girls lived primarily with their mother, as their parents' relationship had unraveled during 2020. Tenerife is geographically remote from mainland Europe, but its communities are tight-knit. In the spring of 2021, those communities would soon be rallying around Beatriz, as she endured every parent's greatest fear. Beatriz and Tomás had separated in mid-2020, not long after Anna's birth. Their split was acrimonious. At the time of their separation, the girls lived primarily with their mother, and Tomás's behavior had become increasingly volatile and controlling. From the day Beatriz left him, Tomás subjected her to daily humiliating and insulting remarks. He was furious that Beatriz had begun to rebuild her life with someone new. In fact, by 2021, Beatriz was dating another man, a gentle older Belgian, and this infuriated Tomás. He made it clear repeatedly that he would not tolerate Beatriz's new partner being around his daughters. Friends would later recall that 37-year-old Tomás Jimeno was outwardly a gregarious, thrill-seeking man, fond of fast cars, pranks, and sport, but that he had a vindictive streak. In private, his resentment toward his ex-partner was growing dangerously intense. He did not want to share custody of the girls, and he especially hated the idea of another man acting as a stepfather figure in their lives. Despite these tensions, there was no formal court order preventing Tomás from seeing his children. In Spain, as in many countries, separated parents often share visitation by informal agreement unless a court deems one parent a danger. Beatriz, hoping to keep life as normal as possible for her daughters, allowed regular visits with their father. The arrangement was that Tomás could take Olivia and Anna on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, spending a few hours with them and returning them to Beatriz's home by the evening. April 27th, 2021, a Tuesday, was one such planned visit. Earlier that day, according to the schedule, Beatriz handed baby Anna to Tomás at her home in the coastal village of Radazul around 5 p.m. Tomás then drove to pick up 6-year-old Olivia from her afternoon school program. Olivia's school, a bilingual German-Spanish academy, happened to be directed by a woman who was Tomás's current girlfriend. When he arrived at the school that day, Tomás had an unusual request. He gave his girlfriend a small taped-up package, a pencil case wrapped in packing tape, and told her not to open it until 11 o'clock that night, instructing her to call him at that hour. It was an odd, secretive errand that left the young woman uneasy. In fact, her curiosity got the better of her. At around 5:20 p.m., she peeled off the tape and opened the package ahead of time. Inside, she found 2 bundles. One was a stack of cash totaling about 6,200 euros, and the other was a handwritten letter from Tomás bidding her farewell. "Remember me for who I was, not for what I did. Please," the letter reportedly said. In that moment, Tomás's girlfriend felt a surge of panic. She realized these were the actions of a man preparing to disappear, or worse. She tried to call him, but he did not answer. Unbeknownst to her, by this time Tomás had collected his daughters and was already carrying out the next steps of a sinister plan. Through the late afternoon, Tomás Jimeno kept up appearances of a normal routine with his children. After picking up Olivia and leaving the package with his girlfriend, he drove both girls to the home of his own parents in Santa Cruz, the island's main city, where the family often gathered. He dropped off 1-year-old Anna with her grandparents for a short stay, while he took Olivia to her regularly scheduled tennis lesson around 6 p.m. Olivia was an active child. She loved sports, and Tuesday was one of her tennis days. Tomás sat through his daughter's tennis practice as if everything were ordinary. Meanwhile, he had left baby Anna in the loving care of his mother and father, which to them probably seemed routine. Nothing outwardly alarming happened at that point. But investigators would later discover that earlier in the day, even as he went about these normal tasks, Tomás had been secretly making preparations that indicated a final, irreversible decision. The night before, on April 26th, he had driven one of his cars, a black Alfa Romeo sedan, to a family-owned property in a rural part of the island, and covered it with a tarp, as if putting it into long-term storage. On the 27th, before picking up his daughters, he visited his bank and withdrew €2,700 in cash, nearly all the money from his accounts, and even tried, unsuccessfully, to extend his credit limit online. These were the acts of a man tying up loose ends. And there was one more telling detail. Around 5:55 p.m. that day, while Olivia was still at tennis, Tomás slipped away briefly to Tenerife's Marina Santa Cruz, where his small pleasure boat Esquilón was moored. Security cameras later showed that he ran the boat's engine for a few moments, likely testing it, and then left. By 7 p.m., with Olivia's lesson over, Tomás retrieved Anna from the grandparents and headed toward his own residence in Igeste de Candelaria, a quiet village area about 20 minutes south of the city. The three of them, father, Olivia, and baby Anna, arrived at Tomás's house sometime around 7:30 in the evening. What exactly happened inside the house between 7:30 and 9 p.m. on April 27th can only be inferred from forensic evidence. Investigators believe that in this window of time, Tomás Jimeno did the unthinkable. He murdered his two daughters, likely by suffocating or smothering them with towels or pillows. Tomás's precise actions in those moments remain known only to him. But what he did next was carefully calculated. After killing his daughters, Tomás wrapped each small body in towels. He then placed each of them into large garbage bags, and those bags in turn were placed inside 2 gym sports bags, duffel bags with zippers. At some point during this grim task, Tomás appears to have injured himself slightly. By about 9 p.m., his preparations were complete. The bodies of Olivia and Anna were now zipped inside sports bags, their father having turned their lifeless forms into cargo for disposal. He carried these heavy bags out to the driveway and loaded them into the trunk of his white Audi A3 sedan. Under the cover of darkness, Tomás then drove out of his property and headed back toward his parents' house in Santa Cruz. This might seem an odd detour after committing such a crime, returning to the vicinity of family. But Tomás had a reason. Arriving at his parents' residence once more around 9:15 p.m., he quietly slipped inside without drawing attention. He didn't bring the girls in, they were already gone, their bodies in the car outside. Inside the house, Tomás quickly gathered a few personal items he still had with him. He left behind his beloved dog and its leash, as well as 2 credit cards, along with their PIN numbers written down, and the keys to that black Alfa Romeo he had parked and covered the day before. These were essentially parting gifts, his way of putting his affairs in order and providing final messages. He made sure no one in the house saw him directly. In fact, his own parents later said they had no idea he had come by that night. Within minutes, Tomás was gone again, this time for good. At around 9:30 p.m., surveillance cameras at the Marina Tenerife, Santa Cruz's marina, captured Tomás Jimeno arriving in his Audi. Witnesses later recalled seeing him there, moving with brisk purpose. Notably, however, no one saw the 2 girls with him. The children were nowhere to be seen on the marina's security footage. Tomás began ferrying his morbid cargo from the parking area to his boat Esquilón, which was a small white pleasure craft about 6.4 meters long, roughly 21 feet. He made several trips back and forth, lugging the unusually heavy duffel bags down the dock to the water. A marina security guard who observed him thought perhaps he was carrying diving equipment or something heavy for a night fishing trip. Nothing too out of the ordinary for a boat owner. At one point, Tomás even paused to chat with another man at the marina, maintaining a calm demeanor. No one that night had any inkling of what lay inside those bags. By 9:40 p.m., Tomás had untied Esquilón and motored out of the harbour under cover of darkness. From this point forward, most of what we know comes from a combination of forensic analysis, cell phone records, and later, his own partial admission in phone calls. After leaving the marina, Tomás steered his boat into open waters off the eastern coast of Tenerife. The night was moonlit and quiet, with the silhouettes of the island's mountains dark against the sky. He navigated to a spot he knew well, about 3 nautical miles, roughly 3.5 miles, offshore from Santa Cruz, where the seabed drops into an abyss more than 1,000 meters deep. It's a place where the Atlantic Ocean is vast and black, and the bottom is so deep that sunlight never reaches it. At around 10:30 p.m., in that lonely expanse of ocean, he carried out the next phase of his plan. He attached one of the sports bags, the one containing Olivia's body, to a heavy anchor from his boat, using a length of chain. The other bag, presumably with Anna's tiny body, may have been weighted down with another heavy object. Tomás had also brought along several diving weights and perhaps a second anchor or large object. With the engine idling, he pushed the bags overboard into the sea. The weight of the anchor and chain dragged them down into the darkness, sinking rapidly through the water. Tomás was attempting to ensure that his daughters would disappear forever, hidden in a place where nobody would ever find them. It is painful to imagine that moment, a father deliberately casting his own children into the sea. But for Tomás Gimeno, this was the twisted culmination of his scheme to hurt Beatriz. By denying the girls a proper resting place, and denying their mother any knowledge of their fate, he intended to maximize Beatriz's suffering. Right after he consigned the sports bags to the deep, Tomás made a phone call. It was the call that would soon alert everyone that something was terribly wrong. At approximately 10:30 p.m., Tomás dialed Beatriz's number. On her end, at that very moment, Beatriz was sitting in a local civil guard station in Tenerife, having decided to report her daughters missing when they hadn't come home on time. Beatriz answered, desperate for news. Tomás's voice came through eerily calm over the crackle of the phone line. He told Beatriz that he was leaving, taking the girls with him, and that she would not see any of them ever again. He did not explicitly say he had harmed the children. He left it ambiguous, perhaps to prolong her torment. Beatriz pleaded to know what that meant, but Tomás gave little detail. He made a few self-pitying remarks, suggesting that she should remember him as he used to be, as he did to his girlfriend. He also said that he didn't want them growing up without him, or with another man in his place. It was during this call that Beatriz, already frantic, realized with dawning horror that her worst fear was coming true. She urged him to bring the girls back, but he refused. Then he hung up. Her hands shaking, Beatriz told the civil guard officers what he had said. It was a phrase that no officer ever wants to hear. "You'll never see your daughters again." Instantly, the situation escalated from a late handover or possible parental abduction to an emergency that felt like life or death. Meanwhile, Tomás still lingered on the water. Shortly after that call, around 11:15 p.m., a civil guard marine patrol boat actually encountered Esquilón near the harbour entrance of Santa Cruz. Spain was then under COVID curfew restrictions, and a lone boat out at nearly midnight caught the attention of the authorities. The patrol boat approached and found Tomás on board, alone. Unaware of the drama unfolding, the officers simply reprimanded him for breaching curfew and instructed him to return to port immediately. Tomás complied without protest. He steered back into the marina by around 11:30 p.m., mooring at the dock once more. If the civil guard had known at that moment who they had in front of them and what he had just done an hour earlier, they would have arrested him on the spot and perhaps saved lives. But tragically, they had no way of knowing. To them, Tomás was just a solitary sailor breaking curfew. He showed them his ID, chatted politely, and said he planned to sleep on his boat that night. Satisfied, the patrol moved on. Back at the dock, Tomás made a few brief final actions. Surveillance cameras recorded him going up to his car again, still parked where he left it. He retrieved a mobile phone charger. His phone battery had been dying, and then walked to a nearby vending area to buy a pack of cigarettes from a machine. He didn't appear agitated on the footage. In fact, he looked composed. He returned to his boat, plugged in his phone to charge for a short while, and perhaps smoked a last cigarette. He also placed a call to his girlfriend, the one who had opened the goodbye letter, around midnight, but she did not answer. He left a brief voicemail. By 12:27, just after midnight on April 28th, Tomás untied Esquilón again and headed out of the marina for the second time that night. This was his final departure. He steered into the darkness and vanished on the same course as before, towards the deep open sea. After that moment, Tomás Jimeno was never seen alive again. In the very early hours of April 28th, authorities sprang into action. Beatriz's missing persons report, combined with the alarming phone call, made it clear that this was an exceptional case. The Civil Guard, Spain's national gendarmerie with police duties, immediately began a search operation. Local patrols scoured the coastline roads looking for Tomás's car, and officers rushed to the Santa Cruz marina to check for his boat. By dawn that morning, a troubling discovery confirmed that something had gone very wrong on the water. Around 6:30 a.m. on April 28th, a port security team found Esquilón adrift in the bay near Puertito de Guimar, about 10 miles south of Santa Cruz. The boat was empty, its engine was off, and it was just bobbing unmanned with the currents. Notably, the boat's anchor was missing. Its chain was hanging over the side, cut or snapped loose. This immediately raised suspicions. Why would a small leisure boat have no anchor unless it had been deliberately dropped? The Civil Guard towed the drifting vessel back to port for examination. On board, they found a few drops of blood in the cockpit and on the gunwale. Forensic tests would soon identify the blood as Tomás's own. There was no trace of the girls on the boat, but something else was found floating nearby that sent a chill through the searchers. A child's car seat bobbed up in the waves, not far from where the boat was recovered. It was a baby carrier of the type used for infants in a car, one that Beatriz immediately recognized as belonging to little Anna. The sight of that empty child's seat in the ocean was like a horror movie prop come to life. Rescuers plucked it from the water, treating it as a crucial piece of evidence. By now, hopes that this was a simple parental abduction, where the father might have run off with the children to another island or abroad, were fading. The combination of the father's menacing phone call, his abandoned boat, the missing anchor, and the infant car seat adrift in open water all pointed to a grim scenario. The case was quickly reclassified from a missing persons alert to a suspected double homicide, a filicide, and kidnapping. A massive search operation was launched that day. The Spanish Civil Guard's Central Operational Unit, an elite investigative branch often handling high-profile cases, took charge. Tenerife's coastal waters were swarmed by search teams in boats and helicopters, looking for any sign of Tomás, Anna, or Olivia. Local volunteers combed the shoreline, hoping against hope that the girls might have washed up somewhere, or that Tomás might be floating on debris. The initial theory was uncertain. Had he perhaps thrown the girls overboard and then jumped in himself? Or could he have faked a suicide at sea and escaped somewhere? Nothing was off the table. Interpol and Spanish National Police issued international alerts describing Tomás and his daughters in case he had managed to flee to another country. Ports and airports in the Canary Islands and mainland Spain were on alert, though it seemed unlikely he could have gotten far without being noticed. As days passed, more clues surfaced from the investigation on land. Detectives searched Tomás's house in Egeste and found it suspiciously tidy. There were signs the girls had been there, a half-eaten children's dinner left out, some of Olivia's drawings, but nothing to indicate a struggle. On April 29th, a court in Tenerife imposed a gag order on the case to allow police to work without media interference. Nonetheless, news leaked out. Spanish media learned about the threatening phone call and the abandoned boat, and the story of the missing Tenerife girls spread nationwide. By the end of April, photographs of Anna and Olivia, two adorable young faces, were on the front pages of newspapers and the top of TV newscasts across Spain. The public held on to the slimmest chance that the girls might still be alive somewhere. But privately, investigators grew more convinced that Tomás had killed his daughters and likely taken his own life that night. This appeared to be a case of vicarious violence, a term not widely known at the time, which describes a parent, usually a father, murdering his children to cause pain to the other parent. It is considered the most extreme and heinous form of gender-based violence. Throughout May 2021, the search intensified. The Spanish Navy and Coast Guard provided specialized equipment to sweep the ocean. Sonar was used to scan the sea floor for any unusual objects or shapes. Tenerife's maritime shelf is steep. Not far from shore, the depth plummets to over 1,000 meters, more than 3,300 feet. Searching such depths is an enormous challenge, akin to looking for evidence at the bottom of a dark canyon. On land, dozens of volunteers walk the cliffs and coves of Tenerife's southeast coast daily, looking for washed-up debris, perhaps clothing or one of the sports bags, but nothing definitive was found in those first weeks. Investigators did have one advantage. They had a good idea where to look underwater. Cell phone data from the night of April 27th indicated that Tomás's phone had remained for some time in a particular area offshore, likely the spot where he stopped the boat and made those fateful calls. That gave them a search zone, albeit 13 nautical miles out to sea and very deep below. By early May, with no results from surface searches, authorities decided they needed truly advanced tools. They called in the Ángeles Alvarinho, an oceanographic research vessel belonging to Spain's Institute of Oceanography. This ship, equipped with state-of-the-art side-scan sonar and a remote-operated underwater vehicle, was deployed to Tenerife specifically to hunt for clues on the seabed. The arrival of the Ángeles Alvarinho at the end of May brought a ray of hope that technology might succeed where human searchers could not. For days, the Ángeles Alvarinho crisscrossed the target area off Santa Cruz, mapping the ocean floor and probing every crevice with its sonar and cameras. The ship's crew were accustomed to scientific missions, not manhunts, yet they dedicated themselves to this search. It was painstaking work, monitoring screens for any anomaly in the expanse of mud and rocks below. Finally, on June 8, 2021, 6 weeks after the disappearance, there was a breakthrough. The underwater robot's camera picked up a shape lying on the seabed about 1,000 meters down. As it drew closer, the operators identified it as a large compressed air scuba tank, the kind used for diving. Nearby was a crumpled bed duvet or quilt. These items were confirmed to belong to Tomás Jimeno, likely part of the supplies on his boat. The oxygen cylinder might have been intended as extra weight, or possibly brought in case he had a mind to dive himself, though no one believed he could have dived to anywhere near that depth. The finding of these personal objects was a crucial sign. It tied the suspect to that specific deep area of the ocean floor. Encouraged, the search team redoubled their efforts, extending the mission beyond its initial schedule. Spanish authorities, who had been considering ending the costly search, decided to keep Ángeles Alvarinho scanning a little longer. It was a fateful decision that would soon yield answers. On June 10th, 2021, the unforgiving Atlantic finally gave up one of its secrets. Around midday, the ROV's camera spotted something eerie in the silt, nearly 3,000 feet below the surface. A large sports duffel bag sitting unnaturally on the ocean floor. The bag was partially torn open. As the robotic claw moved in to investigate, it became clear the bag was empty. Whatever had been inside was gone. But within hours, the robot made a second discovery a short distance away. Another sports bag, intact and sealed, attached to a length of chain. That chain, in turn, was secured to a boat anchor, the very anchor missing from Esquilón. With delicate maneuvers, the ROV brought this second bag up closer to the surface, where investigators could retrieve it. Inside, heartbreakingly, were human remains. Later that evening, the Canary Islands High Court confirmed what everyone feared. The body was identified as 6-year-old Olivia Beatriz Zimmermann. She had been found at the bottom of the sea, stuffed in a sports bag, and chained to her father's anchor. The worst had been confirmed. Olivia was dead, and by every indication, so was little Anna. Investigators believe the first, ripped bag was Anna's. Likely her smaller body had slipped out as the bag tore open during the descent, or due to underwater currents. It might have been carried away beyond the search area. Despite intensive scanning in the days immediately after, neither Anna's body nor Tomas's was found in the vicinity. But the evidence was overwhelming now. This was a double child murder and a likely suicide by drowning. News of the discovery broke late on June 10th and sent shockwaves across Spain. Hopes for a miracle outcome were crushed. The following day, June 11th, forensic experts confirmed through fingerprint analysis that the recovered body was indeed Olivia. An autopsy in the Tenerife Institute of Legal Medicine provided further detail on her death. Olivia had died from pulmonary edema consistent with suffocation, not drowning. There were no drugs in her system, meaning Tomas had not even sedated his daughters. He killed them deliberately and consciously. With Olivia's body as evidence, the investigative judge in charge wasted no time. The gag order on the case was lifted on June 11th, allowing the public release of key facts from the inquiry. On June 12th, the court officially reclassified the case. Previously, it had been an abduction, unlawful removal of minors case, but now it became a homicide investigation. An international arrest warrant was issued for Tomas Gimeno, accusing him of 2 counts of aggravated murder of victims under age 16, and 1 count of moral injury against the mother, psychological violence, in the context of gender violence. The case was transferred to a special gender violence court, Violence Against Women Court No. 2 in Santa Cruz, since the entire crime was now understood as an act of domestic violence targeting Beatriz through her children. In Spanish legal terms, the murders of Anna and Olivia were firmly classified under machista, gender-based violence, specifically the subcategory of vicarious violence. Tomas's actions fit this category exactly, harming one's children as proxies to cause maximum emotional damage to the mother. By mid-June, the Angeles Alvarinho had done all it could. After covering the search grid extensively, authorities reluctantly concluded that recovering Anna or Tomas's remains was nearly impossible, given the depths and sea conditions. On June 24th, the ship left Tenerife to return to its regular duties, and the undersea search was formally called off. It was presumed that Anna's tiny body had been lost to the ocean's vastness, a thought that pained the entire country, and especially Beatriz, who was left without the chance to bury her baby. As for Tomas Gimeno, investigators strongly believed that he too had perished in the Atlantic that night after his second departure from port. The theory was that he either intentionally leapt overboard with a heavy weight to ensure he drowned, or he might have even tied himself to a weight. The discovery of one of his oxygen tanks floating in the area days later lent credence to the idea that he had removed it from his boat before jumping, possibly to use as a weight or simply discarding it as he prepared to die. By October 2021, police officials publicly stated they were 99% sure that Tomas Gimeno was dead at sea. No credible sighting or communication from him ever emerged. Indeed, to this day, his body has never been found. With the primary suspect presumed dead and no trial possible, the legal process in the case moved toward a conclusion of a different sort. Over the subsequent months, Judge Maria de Los Angeles Zabala, the examining magistrate of the Violence Against Women court handling the case, compiled a comprehensive report of the evidence and findings. It held Tomas Gimeno responsible for the aggravated murders of Anna and Olivia, noting that all evidence indicated he had acted alone and with premeditation. An international arrest warrant for Tomas remains on the books, and in a grim formality, the statute of limitations for the murders extends 20 years from the date of the crime, until 2041, should he miraculously be found alive before then. Few harbour any doubt, however, that Gimeno met his end in the Atlantic's depths. While the judicial process quietly closed, the impact of this case exploded into Spanish society, changing conversations and even laws. The Anna and Olivia case, as it became known, prompted a period of national mourning and introspection about domestic violence and child protection. When news broke, that Olivia's body had been recovered, confirming the girl's murder. An outpouring of grief and fury swept the country. In the capital, Madrid, and in Barcelona, hundreds observed moments of silence, their heads bowed in sorrow and solidarity with Beatriz Zimmermann. Signs began to appear at rallies reading "No to vicarious violence," reflecting a public that was not only grieving but growing angry at the societal failures that allowed this to happen. On June 11, 2021, Queen Letizia of Spain, herself a mother of 2 girls, spoke at an event and departed from her prepared remarks to address the news. "I don't think there is anyone this morning who is not trying to put themselves in the shoes of the people who love these murdered girls," the Queen said, visibly moved. Even the Spanish royal family was shaken by the horror of what had occurred in Tenerife. Politicians from all parties voiced outrage and proposed action. Spain's Prime Minister, Pedro Sánchez, sent condolences to Beatriz and condemned the killings as an intolerable act of machista violence. Irene Montero, the Minister of Equality, whose portfolio includes domestic violence prevention, vowed to ensure never again would such crimes be allowed to occur without every possible preventive measure. She and many others tweeted under the hashtag "No More Vicarious Violence," thrusting what had been a specialist term into the mainstream lexicon. Media outlets took care to explain the term repeatedly. It consists of causing harm to the mother through the children. In June 2021 and into 2022, the Spanish government accelerated reforms to better protect children in domestic abuse situations. A major piece of legislation, informally known as the Rhodes Law, named after a prominent advocate for child abuse victims, was brought into effect. Among its many provisions, it explicitly recognized vicarious violence as a specific manifestation of gender-based violence. Family judges were instructed to take a history of domestic abuse much more seriously when considering custody and visitation arrangements. In practice, this means that if a parent, usually the mother, reports threats or abuse from the other parent, especially threats involving the children, the court should err on the side of caution, potentially suspending visitation rights for the allegedly abusive parent. Furthermore, there was a push to eliminate the controversial concept of parental alienation syndrome from legal arguments. In the past, abusive fathers had sometimes accused mothers of turning children against them, alienating them, to gain advantage in custody battles. Women's advocates pointed out that this pseudo-concept had often been used to dismiss mothers' legitimate fears about violent ex-partners. After Ana and Olivia's murders, Spanish courts and legislators showed increased skepticism towards such claims, acknowledging that the risk of vicarious violence is real and deadly. For Beatriz Zimmermann, the aftermath was a period of unimaginable grief, but also of courage and advocacy. In the weeks after losing her daughters, Beatriz released open letters to the public, one of the few ways she could express the depth of her sorrow and her thanks for the support she received. In one heartbreaking letter, she wrote, "They are now 2 angels, teaching a great lesson at the cost of their lives." She implored society to learn from this atrocity so that no other children have to suffer this, and no other mother has to go through what I'm going through. She referred to what happened as the most monstrous act a person can commit. In a particularly gut-wrenching line, Beatriz confessed that she wished she had died with Olivia and Ana, but as she put it, that couldn't be, because Tomás wanted me to suffer, searching for them without rest. That was the reason he left me alive. One of Beatriz's first requests after Olivia's body was found was to symbolically sever the familial tie with the killer. She asked that her daughters be remembered by her surname, Zimmermann, alone, legally dropping their paternal surname, Jimeno. To Beatriz, this was important to reclaim their memory from the man who destroyed them. The public continued to support Beatriz in myriad ways. A local NGO advocating for missing persons, led by a man named Joaquina Mills, stood by her side from the early days of the search. Artists and musicians offered tributes. Spanish singer Alejandro Sanz dedicated a concert to Ana and Olivia, and thousands of social media users posted messages in solidarity. Perhaps the most touching tribute came in October 2022, about a year and a half after the tragedy. In Santa Cruz de Tenerife, not far from the marina where the girls were last seen, the city unveiled a bronze sculpture in honor of Ana and Olivia. The statue, created by sculptor Julio Nieto, depicts two young sisters holding hands and playing, frozen in a moment of innocent joy. The older girl, representing Olivia, is gently leading the younger Ana as they skip together. Their expressions are bright and full of sisterly love. The sculpture stands in a park overlooking the sea, the same sea that holds their secrets, as if to watch over the waters and remind everyone who passes by of what was lost here. If you're interested in these types of rarely heard global murder cases, we encourage you to give us a follow or even rate us 5 stars on your podcast app, if we may be so bold. It would really help us out a lot. See you next time.